now we have someone who has an actual well-known law named after him. Google it. Mike Godwin. Thanks for coming, Mike.
First, I want to thank Mistress Clarissa for explaining to me what freedom to connect really means. I'm here to talk today. You know, I've actually rewrote my whole presentation this morning because of yesterday. Because when I was listening to yesterday's presentations, they were all kind of about how these big moneyed interests were really shaping how the internet is working and what people can do on the internet. And it was really depressing, you know, because it's so hard to be effective when you've got that much money and power arrayed against you. But then I thought, you know, I have some success stories largely due to my work as general counsel and later as a consulting lawyer for Wikipedia. And so I thought I would talk about those. I had always planned to talk about the roots of the Wikipedia blackout, which were really about fighting SOPA and PIPA. And it's one way, and it's a way in which, in some small way, I get to honor the memory of Aaron Swartz. But I can tell a story that maybe some of you haven't fully heard, which is how the roots of the Wikipedia blackout in opposition to SOPA and PIPA came about. Now, maybe you don't know, I don't know what you know about Wikipedia. A lot of people think it makes a lot of money, but really compared to the commercial websites, it doesn't. It's a top 10 website, but it's the only one that is non-commercial. It's the only one, when I first came on board in 2007, it was a top 10 website then, top 10 in the world, by the way, not just in the USA. And we had 7 staff members, including me. It was amazing. I mean, we had a lot of volunteers all around the world, but only 7 paid staff. And now, of course, the staff has grown to more than 100, maybe more than 120. I can't ever keep track anymore. But the thing is, we knew we had something that was really valuable to the whole world, but we didn't have a whole lot of resources to protect it. Because the money, even then, came from donors and pledge drives, and even then we were asking for a lot less money just to keep the servers running. And of course, Wikipedia content is free. You know, there's no commercial interest in obtaining Wikipedia content or providing it. And it's not free just as in free beer, as Richard Stallman would say, but it is free as in free beer. So if you like free beer, you will like free content on Wikipedia, certainly. But it's also free as in free speech in the same sense that Richard Stallman often cites it. But the main thing, and it's really important to understand this, is it's also free in the sense of a free culture, a free democratic form of governance, because the content decisions are made by editors who are active in shaping the website, shaping the content, even shaping operational aspects of the website. They shape the content, they do the governance. Wikimedia Foundation keeps the lights on and collects money and tries to make sure that the site is available to people around the world in as many languages as possible. So because of Wikipedia's unique status as an enterprise run by a nonprofit, it's particularly vulnerable. You know why? Because it's so popular. It turns out that there are people all around the world who are unhappy with stuff that Wikipedia says. Maybe it's about them, maybe it's about their religion, maybe it's about sex, but whatever it is, or maybe it's about violence or politics, but whatever it is, there are people who see the popular site Wikipedia and say, well, that's a great target for us to bring a lawsuit. And you know, unlike Google or Yahoo or Bing or any other top 10 website, Wikipedia does not have the hugest litigation defense budget in the world. It doesn't. I mean, for a long time, we had only volunteer lawyers, and then when I came on staff, we had one lawyer, which was me. And believe me, I can't litigate that many cases. I can't even litigate a fraction of those cases. Different jurisdictions, making it even more complicated, besides the sheer numbers, that the different jurisdictions around the world have different laws. They're all inconsistent. There's no way that you can be in compliance with every jurisdiction that Wikipedia can be read in. So how do you minimize exposure? Well, I did a bunch of stuff when I was general counsel, and I advised on a lot of stuff when I left as general counsel. But you know, the great jurisdictional firewall is level 1, right? What you do is you put as much stuff inside the continental United States or inside the United States borders as you possibly can, and you force people to come to you if they're going to sue you. So they can sue us in Hong Kong or they can sue us in Belarus, but it doesn't really matter until they try to enforce the judgment in the United States court. And if the judgment that they're trying to enforce somehow infringes on fundamental rights as they're guaranteed in the United States, like free speech or freedom of religion or so on, then it turns out that you can block it. So we have basically a jurisdictional firewall. Is it perfect? No. You know why? Because occasionally a really enterprising plaintiff or a really enterprising government will go after you in a foreign court, they'll get a judgment, and then they'll try to enforce the judgment inside the United States in a U.S. court. Now, U.S. courts are pretty good about protecting us from this stuff, but it's not seamless. And occasionally, people do get past. For one thing, they could decide that the case was properly adjudicated. They could decide incorrectly that the case was properly adjudicated in a foreign tribunal. And even if we didn't show up and grant jurisdiction, they could say, well, it doesn't matter. You're going to have to face this judgment. Well, German murderers came to my attention. It turns out that there were a pair of German murderers who in the 1990s murdered a German TV star named Walter Sedlmayr. This is Wolfgang Verley and Manfred Lauber. And they served their time. It turns out that in Germany, a life sentence is 15 years. I don't think that speaks for the life expectancy in Germany. It turns out that if you're sentenced to life, but you do good behavior, you basically get out in 15 years. I mean, in a sense, it's quite humane. However, having said that, they served their time, and then they said, well, we can't get hired because, the whole world knows that we're murderers. It's on the internet. It's in the articles in Wikipedia. And so what they did is they sued in every available jurisdiction to try to get Wikipedia to change its content and to remove their names. So they could have an article about the murder, but they remove their names. The German Wikipedians, remember Wikipedia content is done by the editors, the German Wikipedians removed their names in the German Wikipedia, but dissenting German Wikipedians went to the English language Wikipedia and added their names in. So we got sued for the English language Wikipedia article about the murder of Walter Sedlmayr. And so what do you do when you have no money? Well, here's what I did. I just looked at this result. I said, they're suing us. It's not so much that we can't win this case. We can probably win it. But what happens with the next 100 cases? We can't afford to win all those. So what I did is we knew that any defense would be likely successful, but we knew it would be expensive to defend. So what we did is we got it into the New York Times. And this was the special thing that I did with the New York Times is when I gave the papers, I said, this is a really interesting case because you have German murderers trying to erase history. And it turns out that I have a tick about German murderers trying to erase history. It's like a hot button for me. Okay, so that was the joke that I was going to do in this one. So anyway, what we did is we got into the Times, and the New York Times carefully reproduced their names. So the next time, the funny thing is that their lawyers were a husband and wife team, Herr Dr. Stopp, S-T-O-P-P, and his wife, Frau Stopp. So they were Stopp und Stopp. So we got a cease and desist from Stopp and Stopp. But eventually we beat them. It turns out that if you have plaintiffs inside the United States, the jurisdictional firewall doesn't help you, but maybe publicity does. The FBI threatened to sue Wikipedia because we had the FBI seal, which they said was against a federal statute. I read the statute. It was clearly misread by the FBI. In fact, they were careful to remove the language that made it clear that it didn't apply to us whenever they cited the letter in their correspondence to us. I know it seems strange that the FBI lies sometimes, but sometimes they do. What's the low-cost fix? Again, we did press coverage, but here's the deal. The FBI can sue me forever inside the United States. They have a lot of money. They're not even responsible for having to meet budget requirements for suing me. So how do we stop them? Well, I wrote a letter that was really responsive to the legal issues, but I made the point, and I declared this all up and down the line with Wikipedia's executive hierarchy. I said, I have to make it funny. And so I wrote a funny letter, or a deliberately snarky letter, that also was correct on the law, and then I gave it to the New York Times, and it got reproduced in 160 newspapers around the world. All the cost was my time writing a funny letter, and those of you who've seen me online know that I can be snarky from time to time. So I wrote a kind of a snarky letter, and I got letters from law students for the next year saying, I read your letter, that was such a great letter, I didn't know lawyering could be so much fun. But what do you do when you're not dealing with a case, when you're dealing with bad laws? Well, publicity is helpful, but it's not enough. We had publicity about SOPA and PIPA. It wasn't quite enough. on the ground lobbying, you need that. That's a necessary but not necessarily a sufficient condition for stopping a bad law. What are the alternatives? Well, we know that the activist community inside DC was working really hard to stop SOPA and PIPA and to stop COICA, which came before it, and they weren't really getting traction, so that by fall of 2011, it seemed like a done deal that SOPA and PIPA were going to pass. And this is the point where people like me and Aaron Swartz said, we got to do something. And what are we going to do? Well, you know, I had been suggesting blackouts for different language groups in Wikipedia for some time. So once with the German murderers, and by the way, the German Wikipedians said, no, we can never have a blackout, that would be bad. So the German Wikipedians didn't like a blackout. But the French Wikipedians were dying to, apparently the French like to go on strike. Who knew? So we were almost going to do it in France, but it turned out the Italians did it first, so the Italians went on strike. They blacked out the Italian Wikipedia with our support, and they stopped a law that was going to be for the advantage of a particular prime minister who shall not be named, except his last name begins with a B. It turns out that we stopped that law in Italy, but we had a test case for the Wikipedia blackout. Now here's the thing, if the traditional processes in Washington are failing you, you have to do something dramatic that gets everybody's attention, and that just like the FBI case, it makes the people on the other side look bad. So what we did was we knew that if we compromised, if we got an exemption for things like Wikipedia, that wouldn't be good enough because Wikipedia links to the rest of the web. And if you have websites all over the place being shut down on the basis of these very bad process based on the bad process prescribed in SOPA and PIPA, then if they were blocked or shut down, it would mean that even websites that were immune itself from liability in themselves would still not function as well. The internet as we knew it would be broken. There were people who were ahead of Wikipedia on this. Reddit was ahead of us. Boing Boing was ahead of us. But all the time, people like me and other people were saying internally to Wikipedia, we got to black out. We got to black out in response to SOPA and PIPA. So I want to say who deserves credit? Aaron Swartz deserves credit because he certainly led the Reddit blackout and started preaching blackouts to other people. Cory Doctorow picked up that theme and decided to black out Boing Boing. And Jimmy Wales, who knows them both, said, yes, we absolutely have to do it in Wikipedia. And so one of the things I did as a consulting attorney for Wikipedia was lay the legal groundwork so that we could do it and get away with it. So people who also deserve credit, Sue Gardner, who is executive director, who still is executive director of the Wikimedia Foundation, and Jeff Brigham, who's general counsel, they deserve credit. We're coming to the end. I hope we're watching our time. But we're coming to the end. The most important thing is that the Wikipedians themselves, the people who were personally, individually, on a volunteer basis engaged, were the people who united behind. We didn't decide to do this at the top. We put it out there and they voted to do it because we knew that we couldn't do it. We couldn't order them to do it. That would be more top-down authority that would be antithetical to the democratic nature of Wikipedia culture. But when they agreed to do it, we supported them. News coverage, Wikipedia, I think, turned the tide. I'm not going to say that any one thing turned the tide, but Wikipedia has as strong a claim on that as any because a lot of congressmen and senators discovered that their kids couldn't do their homework that day. SOPA and PIPA, they backed off of SOPA and PIPA, and basically SOPA and PIPA died and they haven't been revived. The implications, so this is really important. It is possible to triumph over mere money and power. You have to think hard about to do it. You have to outthink your opponent. But just as in martial arts, sometimes your opponent's greater strength or weight or speed or things that you can maybe use against them, sometimes you can use it against your opponents in political processes as well. We can't do it all the time, but the very fact that we did it once turns out to have had a really salutary effect on people who are proposing internet legislation right now. And because of that, we think it's a little bit like, it's not quite like Hiroshima, but maybe it did send a message. This is all about freedom to connect. One of the things that I want to really stress here is that the people want Wikipedia to be nonpartisan. Famously, Wikipedia has a neutral point of view and doesn't take a political side, but there is inherently a political judgment in the notion of providing free information to everyone in the way that Wikipedia does, and that's what we stood for with the Wikipedia blackout. Did I make it, David?